Galatians chapter number 2 and verse number 13 again. When I left the radio yesterday, I was pointing out the effect of Peter's separation from the Gentiles had on the other Jews that had arrived, and also had on the Gentile believers and on Barnabas. In verse number 11, but when Peter was come to Antioch, I withstood him to the face, because he was to be blamed. And the reason Peter was to be blamed is given in verse number 12. For before that certain came from James, he did eat with the Gentiles, but when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself. And the reason for this was a phobia. The Greek word here is phobia, a phobia, fearing them which were of the circumcision. The tense of this word, phobio, is a present participle which shows continual action, having no beginning or ending, just continual action, perpetually continual action. And that's the way it was with the man Peter. Peter was perpetually afraid. He had a perpetual phobia of those that were of the circumcision. I pointed this out over and over on the Right Spot Hour, but it does bear repeating. Peter was never entirely able to get beyond his Jewishness. He could never quite be what God wanted him to be. He could never hold the position that Paul the Apostle held among the uncircumcision, among the heathen. Because Peter could never quite get past his Jewishness. The matter of the law, the matter of his legal upbringing, the matter of the peer pressure placed upon him by the Jews, those that were of the circumcision. Peter wanted to go to Antioch and be received as a good Gentile. He wanted to go to Jerusalem and be received as a good law-keeping Jew. The problem is, those two things cannot mix. Oil and water cannot mix together, and neither can the matter of law and grace. You can't put the two things together. You will have a constant problem and a constant difficulty trying to mix those two things together. Now, every action has a reaction. And you and I should understand that all of us have some measure of influence. And rather than that causing you to become lifted up in pride and swelled up in pride, thinking, I have some influence, I must be an important person because of the influence I have, it should cause all of us to shudder and fear. All men, even a fool, has some influence. And what I do and the way I behave, the way I conduct myself, the things that I stand for and the things I stand against are going to have an influence on other individuals. And the more you and I recognize the influence we have, that none of my actions are in a vacuum, that all of my actions will cause a reaction. We call that the law of sowing and reaping. And if you and I can give ourselves to sowing to the Spirit, we shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. If we sow to the flesh, which I'm afraid much of our sowing is, we shall of the flesh reap corruption. We sow to the wind, will reap the whirlwind. All of us have a level or an area of influence. So what I do is having an effect on other individuals, positively or negatively. Now, for born-again believers, you and I should strive, and I'm speaking practically now, but you and I should strive that in our home, on the job, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, with our families, with our cousins and nephews and nieces and uncles and aunts, that we should strive to sow good seed and to give a Christ-honoring influence. At least if I have family members that don't appreciate the grace of God and don't appreciate my Christianity and don't appreciate my walk with the Lord and my stand for Christ, at least I'm not giving them a license for their dissension and for their profanity and for their alcohol consumption and for their drug use and for their life of unfaith. At least they can't say, well, Ben is no better than I am. He lives just like I do. We should strive in our conduct to set the proper example and to set the proper motive. And you might find, again, all of us have some influence. You might find over a period of time that your positive testimony will have a positive influence, will have a positive effect on your kinfolk and your loved ones that are around you. Your conduct will so work in their lives that they say, well, if Ben can live for the Lord, then I can live for the Lord. If Ben can be in church on Sunday morning and Sunday night and Wednesday night, then I can be in church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. All of us have some influence. Well, now this brings us back to the matter of Peter. Peter is fearful. He has a phobia. He wants to be a good Christian and a good Jew all at the same time. He wants to be good under grace and good under law all at the same time. And those two things don't work out. Had Peter done what he did the last time he came, knowing that he's in a Gentile church and knowing that the born-again believers that are in Christ is neither Jew nor Greek, bond nor free, male nor female, but one new man, so making peace, had Peter gone on ahead and eaten with the Gentiles as he did on his previous visit, he would have engendered favor and engendered testimony and engendered help among the Gentiles that were there. They would have taken confidence in the fact that even Peter the Apostle recognizes that there is no longer a court of the Gentiles and a court of the Jews, because the middle wall of partition has now been broken down in the work of Jesus Christ. But when Peter separated himself, withdrew and separated himself from the Gentile believers that were there in Antioch, that had an influence not only on the Gentiles but on the Jews. Remember that certain came from James. I don't know how large a company of men this might have been, maybe a half a dozen or a dozen men that had come from James. And when Peter withdrew himself and wouldn't eat with the Gentiles, look at verse 13, and other Jews dissembled likewise with him. The influence of Peter refusing to eat with the Gentiles had an effect on the Jews that had accompanied Peter and came from James from Jerusalem. They dissembled likewise with him. Now, I don't know this because it's not written in the text, but I think I'm safe in assuming that if Peter had eaten with the Gentiles and enjoyed full fellowship with the Gentiles, the other Jews that came from James in all probability would have done the same thing. But when Peter refused to sit down and eat with the Gentiles, that had an influence on these Jews, and they dissembled likewise. They refused to sit down with the Gentiles likewise. Now, this is the only time in the New Testament this word is used. And to dissemble, they dissembled in the same manner as Peter did. When Peter withdrew from the Jews that came from James in like manner withdrew from the Gentiles as well. Now, this word dissemble doesn't mean just to withdraw and separate. That's why we have a different word here that is used. The word dissemble also carries the idea of hypocrisy, or to resemble something falsely, to conceal something under a false appearance. The hypocrisy that Peter is involved in is not championing the law, but fearing the brethren that had come from James, who through fear of the circumcision, fearing them which were of the circumcision. Peter is giving the appearance on the outside that he is a noble stalwart from Mosaic law, and that he is a noble stalwart for Jewishness, when he's a hypocrite in giving that appearance, he is in utter hypocrisy. The being a stalwart against the Gentiles in promotion of the Mosaic law and Jewishness is a farce. He is fearful and afraid. It's my estimation that if Peter had not feared them which were of the circumcision, he in all probability would have eaten with the Gentiles without regard of the opinion of the Jews that came from James. So he's a hypocrite. He is making an appearance to be standing, when in all actuality he's not standing at all. He is trying to acquiesce himself to the brethren, the Gentile brethren that had come from James, or the Jewish brethren rather, that had come from James. He is concealing something under a false appearance. You know, it's manifest in pretending not to observe. It is to feign ignorance of something. It is to conceal one's true motives and one's true feelings. And I think that Peter's true feelings are concealed here, because he is giving the appearance of making a stand for righteousness, when actually he's eaten up with fear. Hypocrisy here is called walking not uprightly according to the gospel. Paul points that out in verse number 14, but when I saw that they, Peter and those that had come from James, walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel. And the truth of the gospel is the fact that all men, red, yellow, black, and white, all men, rich, poor, bond, free, Jew or Gentile, all men are saved and justified exactly the same way, being justified freely by His grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. And apart from the redemption that is in Christ Jesus, there is no hope or prospect of salvation or justification for poor lost sinners at all. It is not possible that a lost sinner can be saved outside of Jesus Christ. But in Jesus Christ, there's neither Jew nor Greek, bond nor free, male nor female, but one new man, so making peace. So at this point, Peter is not walking uprightly according to the gospel, because he, by embracing the law and separating from the Gentiles, is going against the very thing the grace of God and salvation in Jesus Christ makes available for poor lost sinners.
Greenville, South Carolina 29602. Visit the website at thebrightspotpower.com.